Welcome to the Volusia County Council meeting. The meeting will begin in 10 minutes. Welcome to the Volusia County Council meeting. The meeting will begin in 5 minutes. Welcome to the Volusia County Council meeting. The meeting will begin in 2 minutes.
Just noticing. I saw the one like 2 hours ago that Aaron replied to.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yeah, he did.
There's the. Okay, if everybody wants to find a seat, we will get started.
Wasn't planned. In fact, we were quite appalled this morning.
Motion to approve. Who's vice mayor? Oh, he left. Our vice mayor's not here.
Okay, thank you all very much. We will call the county council meeting back into session at 6 p.m. Public hearing on the annual budget. George.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Why don't you start this meeting?
Will do. Okay, the purpose of today's meeting is to, well, first of all, it's required by Florida Statute 200.065, but we're here to discuss the millage rates and the percentage increase over rollback where applicable. We're here to explain the reasons for the proposed increase over rollback, which in the general fund is pretty simple. We simply cannot absorb the $3.4 million growth in the cost of Sunrail. It's also the opportunity for the public to speak and ask questions. This meeting will tentatively set the millage rates. The final adoption will be set at the next meeting, and we will set the recommended budget the same way for final adoption at the second meeting. And we'll also set that meeting at the end here, and which of course will be 2 weeks from tonight. So that being said, that is our purpose, and I'm going to turn it over here to our budget director, Aaron Van Cleek, who has, along with the team, and I do want to say, for those who maybe the first time or they haven't been following, budget process didn't just start yesterday. This is something we've worked on. Typically, it gets worked on in earnest from January on to today's date. So we'll have a couple months reprieve, but we're right back at it in January. I know we've already had discussions here where we'll be talking about roads and other things for next year. Also, our capital programs usually start capital equipment, and those things start really in January, and we work through the year. Many of the meetings we've had, and of course we back in June did the 5-year forecast, which is really trying to budget in a 5-year increment so people can see not only what's happening this year, but what we're up against for challenges in the future. But we only adopt one budget at a time, and of course the millage rates were tentatively set in July, and you guys gave us direction here at the very last meeting in August to bring those millage rates back to what we had originally proposed. We'll go over that in a minute. And that brings us here today to the first of the 2 budget hearings that are required. Take it away, Aaron.
Aaron, but before you start, let me just add this because it's a little different than our normal meetings where we always start with public participation. We would like the public to hear your presentation first, and so later on we will have public participation before the council even discusses it. So I didn't want anybody to think they were going to be left out. Go ahead.
All right. So as George mentioned, we did have changes from the previous council meeting that we are presenting here today. The general fund millage rate was reduced from the 3.2862 tentative rate that was set July 16th to the new rate of 3.2007, which is the general fund rate is at the rollback rate plus the increased cost of Sunrail. The operating budget was reduced from the 1.3 billion, 1.327 to 1.322. That difference is the 5 million that we were proposing for roads. And then the non-operating budget was reduced as well because the roads were going into a capital fund. So while we were levying that money in the operating, we were then transferring it to non-operating. So it wasn't $10 million. It was that same 5 million. We just have to count it in both places, which is again why I say you should never add the operating budget and non-operating budget together because it is double counting those numbers. This gives you a millage rate comparison of all of our taxing funds, compares to 23-24's adopted rates, and also compares to the 24-25 rollback rate for each fund. We have 4 rates that have been reduced, 5 rates that are kept flat, including the Volusia Forever and ECHO programs, the voter-approved programs, and then 1 rate that has increased, which is the law enforcement fund for countywide law enforcement services. So as far as where the rates are compared to rollback in the general fund, this gives you a look at what the 3.2007 mils levies and what the 3.1437 mils. The difference of the $3.3 million is dedicated to the increased cost of Sunrail. So that is the only difference where we're at between rollback and the recommended rate. In the law enforcement fund, this gives you that same comparison of ad valorem tax revenue at the 1.5994, which is the recommended mill, compared to the rollback rate of 1.3452. The additional ad valorem tax revenue in this fund is to fully fund the sheriff's budget request and to satisfy countywide law enforcement needs. Volusia Forever and Echo, this is their comparison to rollback, and each of those funds is an additional $878,067 when you compare to rollback. Both programs are recommended at the millage rate approved by the voters, and the additional revenue for Echo will allow for more grant opportunities, and in Forever, it'll provide more funding for land purchases and land conservation management. The MSD comparison to rollback rate, there's an additional $1.5 million in ad valorem tax revenue. That revenue is dedicated to the additional cost for police patrol in the unincorporated area. So remember, the MSD is for unincorporated Volusia. The sheriff is the patrol agency for unincorporated Volusia. We don't pay for that out of the county-wide law enforcement. We pay for that with unincorporated. So just like a city has to levy for their law enforcement, this is the unincorporated area levying for the patrol of unincorporated. The Port Authority comparison, the additional tax revenue is going to intracoastal dredging and beach renourishment. We are putting aside money for that. You guys know the issues that we're dealing with there. And then the fire comparison to rollback, the additional revenue is dedicated to funding the union agreement that was approved earlier this year. I believe it was earlier this year. And then the capital needs, we have Station 15, Station 22, and Station 34 that are all under relocation or remodel operations now. This gives you a look at the total recommended budget, which includes reserves for each of our taxing funds, and then what the ad valorem revenue is going to be for 24-25 based on the recommendations that are before you today. This gives you a look at the countywide operating revenues by category. The ad valorem taxes are at 29.6%. The CRA pass-through is also ad valorem taxes, but it's just ad valorem taxes we collect, and then we pass right through to the community redevelopment agencies that we have. There's 18 of them. This is the countywide operating expenditures by category. Just gives you a look at a categorical breakdown of our entire operating budget. You see the reserves at 28.4%. That ties back to the fund balance from the previous slide. You see 36.8% of fund balance at $486 million. We are using the difference between that 486 and the 377 of one-time money throughout all of our funds in this year's budget. So we are using a substantial amount of fund balance to fund this year's budget. And at this time, unless there's any questions from council, we can go to public participation, and then we can go back to the presentation.
I just have one, it's not really a question, but to ask you to explain for the public a little bit more about the sheriff's, the law enforcement budget. That I think it's important for the public to know that you and Ryan don't set that, the council doesn't set it, the sheriff department and his employees set it because they know what they need better than we do. So is that everything I just said true?
It's 100% true. The sheriff does his budget requests. They know what their operation and what their needs are. And we set the millage, council sets the millage rate based on funding that budget in its entirety. So the vote for that tax rate is a vote to fund the sheriff's budget.
Thank you,
Councilman Santiago, yes.
Follow-up to that. Are any of those other items millage capped, or it's just our millage cap? I know some other ones are, but
So there's two different millage caps we could be talking about. There's the aggregate, because your 10 mil cap, right? If you're a city, you're a 10 mil cap. The county has an aggregate cap as well of 10 mils. And then there's the cap for the law enforcement fund. So this year that we're in now is the first year that we levied a millage in the law enforcement fund. It's formerly known as the fine and forfeiture fund. And so it allows you to levy up to 2 mils for law enforcement needs. And so that's what we are doing. That's what we did last year by levying that. So that is capped at 2 mils. Now, if you were to reach that 2 mil cap in the fine and forfeiture fund, the funding for the sheriff would just roll to the general fund at that point if his budget exceeded that 2 mil cap. Because at the end of the day, that was done under a statute, an old statute. There's only 2 other counties besides us that levy a millage for the fine and forfeiture fund. And it's basically general fund. It's still county-wide, right? It's still a county-wide fund, but it is just for county-wide law enforcement. So there's 2 different caps.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. One other thing on the same subject, if the council was to, the sheriff submits his budget, If the council voted to not accept it, what happens?
Basically, it would go to the governor. The governor would make the decision on whether or not to support the sheriff or support the council.
Correct, okay.
Mr. Chair?
I'm getting a lot of questions about that, so I just want it to be clear to the public. Councilman Santiago.
Does anybody in staff know whether or not there's ever been a movement to make all constitutional officers a separate line item with their own individual millage accountability?
So you can't do that for the tax collector and the property appraiser's office. They are
Did you say can't?
can't.
Okay.
They are commission-based offices, so they get a commission based off of. So for the property appraiser, it's a commission based on the ad valorem taxes each entity levied in the prior year. Now, the cities and the school board don't pay the property appraiser commissions. The county has to pay them by statute. But it is broken down like that. You're just funding the property appraiser's budget based on the ad valorem taxes you levied in the prior year by percentage. And so the only other entities that fund the property appraiser would be the St. Johns River Water Management District, Florida Inland Navigation District, and our independent districts within this county, the hospital districts. The cities and the school board, like I said, we pay that commission for them by statute. And then the tax collector is also commission-based. They're based percentage off of current taxes levied. And then in the same case, the cities and the school board do not pay any commission there. So you got the same entities that pay the commissions for the tax collector as well.
But does anybody know if there's ever been an effort to do that? Which would essentially change
Not to
that.
my knowledge. It would have to change the state.
Yeah, state
Yeah.
law.
I mean, we try to show it, and we can show things as a percentage of the whole. In other words, we know what their budget, basically, when you do the calculation, you can see what their budget is. And you can take that as a percentage of the whole, which would give you not necessarily the millage, but it gives you a comparison to see where, the relative size of each of these operations.
I get it, George. I just think it's a flawed system because the general public just feels that we set the rate, but yet now with this constitutional amendment that happened with all the constitutional officers, they essentially create their own budgets because if we don't approve it, like you were saying, Chair, they just go to the state and they override it, and we have to 99% of the times we have to do it. The legislature, I'll just say, should just say, you know what, the constitutional officers, you're duly elected and you're held responsible to your own budgets, and it should be transparent. But that's maybe a legislative priority that county association can push, but all in the interest of transparency. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That leads to one other question. I'm sorry, but
It's okay.
if I understood you correctly, the property appraisers receives a commission based on the property values of the preceding year.
So not the property values, the taxes levied by each entity. So the county levies 10 different tax levies. Each city is a levy. The school board has 3, and then the independent districts account for 3, plus Florida Inland Navigation and St. John, so there's 5 independent districts.
All right, because it sounded like there was a conflict, because if he tells us every year how much the property values went up, and if he's getting commissions from
No.
that, it's a little bit of a conflict.
No, it's just a percentage of the ad valorem taxes levied in the prior year.
Okay. Sorry, Larry. Where is he?
Don't see it.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So if there's nothing else, you can go to public participation if you'd like.
Carissa, did you receive any more? Then we'll start with Pamela Walker. Did she leave? John Nicholson.
Little problem with Danny DeVito behind me.
You can lower that stand. you know.
We just did that. Okay. At least this is the first time in years I don't have to go on about rollback rate and the problems of rollback rate. Secondly, I do have a problem of not doing the 0.005 millage for infrastructure. I know we're kicking it down the can down the road, but at some point, the can's got to stop. We have to do infrastructure. I know there's talk about maybe sort of kind of possibly perhaps maybe doing it next year. But it's been 5-6 years since we lost the half-penny sales tax. And I do want to bring it up. I do want to be a pain in the rear end with regard to the need for infrastructure. I mentioned earlier in the day the need for drainage and flooding. We absolutely need to get a hold of the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, things of that nature. That half-penny sales tax would have put us at almost $300 million at this point. I'm sure George would have fixed several roads for that kind of money. So if we had passed it, we would have been sitting pretty good. So I'm asking you to think about funding or talking or bringing forward the half-penny sales tax. I would prefer a penny sales tax to match our competitors. The other counties are at 8. So if we go to 7.5, we'll still be below our competing counties. And lastly, I like DeVito's explanation on the sheriff and his grasp of our budget, but I would not be able to explain to my neighbors and people who ask me, could you explain that? And I can't. Okay, so if the chief wants to build this building or this facility or whatever, your hands are tied. Okay, basically, if you say no, we can't afford that $400 million facility or whatever, it's not in our budget, he just says, oh, well, I'll go to the governor and get it passed. And then we have to eat it. And guess who gets voted out of office? He doesn't. And there's no relying on Mike Chitwood being in office forever. So it goes with the office, not the person. So when he leaves, that problem will remain forever. So if you could kind of explain that to the public more, because if I don't understand it, I absolutely know the public doesn't. Thank you.
Thank you. And that completes public participation. Unless you've received more, you have not. And takes us to council discussion.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I didn't put my- Good.
Yes.
I still would have stood behind the additional monies that we had proposed when we put the original notice out there. And I think we had talked about investing that in infrastructure projects. And I know the conversation was it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a step in the right move. So I guess I'm okay with this budget, but I think we have to stop kicking the can down the road with some of these things. And if you recall, about a few months ago, we were dealing with things that were kicked prior years, and we were many of us were upset that prior councils had kicked the can on other topics when they had not invested monies in areas that we should have. So I'll just express that if that were in there, I'd be okay with it because we noticed it, and we have a lot of road projects. We have a lot of infrastructure projects that we have to fund. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Councilman Johansson.
Thank you, sir. I concur with what Mr. Santiago said, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us here, and I alluded to it earlier today, that as soon as the elections are over, as soon as we figure out who's who in the zoo, and come January 1st, that we need to put our nose to the grindstone. And one of the things I'm going to talk about at our organizational meeting is workshops. We like debating. We like having casual conversation. This budget is important. We're talking about bonding things already. I'm not opposed to discussing every option out there, every option, even the ones I'm not too fond of, because we have to solve the problems. We have to work on our core responsibilities, and I'm not saying that the sky is falling, but I don't want it to fall on my watch. And I want to set the next council up long after I go for success, not to be yet a couple $1 billion behind, yet again more than we are now. So we got a lot to do. Next year's not an election year. There won't be so many charged discussions. Let's just do it and do the tough thing and be leaders and make the commitment to make our county safe, prosperous, and free of whatever problem we think, flooding being one of them. So roads being another. Traffic a little bit harder because there's about 80 people who's got their paws in that process. But it's an opportunity. So I concur, Mr. Santiago. Thank you, sir.
Councilman Robbins.
Yeah, David, I'll echo the same. I know I brought it up, but to honor my word to my constituents, we found some options to get us up off the ground. George and the team did a great job of that. And we've also made a commitment to start January 1st and sit down and look at this. And I want to use that millage increase. I use it as a little bit of his leverage to get that unassigned money. But also, too, we planted the seed for something that I think is good. That's going to get us closer towards that finish line. So at the end of the day, I'd be remiss if I didn't give the team and this board a chance, if I didn't retract and hold up my end of the bargain and to take that millage rate off the table because we found it. And I'd like to give us an option to sit down and talk and at the workshop to see what the best avenue of approach is before we do that millage rate. And I'm not opposed to it because we do need it. I think we just see where it goes. You know, here first, I think we had agreed to come back, January? County manager? Sometime in January for it? Okay.
Yes.
For
He's David Santiago for a question for you.
Danny, since he had the floor. I understand what you're saying, but at that point, we won't have that millage, and we don't set millage in January. You know what I mean? So it's basically, we're just saying kicking it a year, basically.
But the way I understood it, Dave, is it gives us that planning. And Aaron, when we were talking, can you explain that process to and sort of what the plan was, where we can figure this millage into the budget for this coming year for that?
So you guys voted to direct $3.8 million in ARPA money to the roads instead of the millage this year. And then you guys will have the workshop in January. You'll look at where the road program is at, what your priorities are, what the funding needs would be for that road program, and then we can determine the best way how to move forward funding it. And we can work that into our budget request, the county manager's recommended budget next year. Your values typically grow each year. There have been years in the past where they have fallen. So there could be some value change that could help us in achieving that road millage. Or we can, find other ways to where we present the millage rate to you guys. It'll include the road funding, or at least a portion of it.
But that 3.3 million, if I may, Mr. Chair, just a follow-up continuation.
3.8.
Where, the 3.8 million, you're setting, where's that coming from?
That was ARPA reserves.
That's what we did 2 weeks ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
I get it. I just know we have a lot more that we have to do. That's a mist in the bucket, not even a drop.
Absolutely. But
I get it, Jenny. Danny, I'm not beating up on you. I just wish, we just take the bull by the horns. You know what I mean? I'm ready to grab that thing. And I've never been to a rodeo. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You done? Okay. I'll just add this to that. My concern is that if we add to the millage rate to pay for roads, if it's part of the general fund, we will never see a rollback again. The need is tremendous for infrastructure. So I'm looking forward to the workshop that we're going to have with looking at how we can finance it, and like Jake said, to talk about things that I don't necessarily like, that I'm not going to vote for a sales tax increase. But we need to look at it all. And so that I'm just putting it on the table. That's my concern with that increase, is that it just grows and grows forever. I'll let you, did you
I was going to make a
want to
motion.
respond to that? Okay, let me just finish with this. I wanted to tell staff and council, a year ago, when we started discussing this, I had asked for a percentage increase, and George said that rather than do a percentage, why don't we bring you back a budget that goes to rollback, which was ultimately the goal. Appreciate the hard work that was done to do that. We came just shy of it because of Sunrail. We still don't know exactly how much Sunrail is going to cost us. We have a better idea, and it's probably not as bad as what we had feared 5 years ago, but we still don't know, and it could be worse than what we expect, depending on what the Central Florida Commuter Rail Commission does, and our response to it. So it was Sunrail still looms out there as a big hurdle. Commissioner Councilman Santiago, you wanted to make a
Yeah, let's do it. I just want to. Do you need me to read all the numbered?
I'll read them into the record.
There you go.
So I'll read the rates into the record, and then you guys can vote on the rates, and then I have to read the budget into record, and you can vote on that. Are you ready to proceed with that?
yes, sir.
Okay. All right. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the countywide taxing authority Volusia County General Fund is 3.2007 mils, which is greater than the rolled back rate of 3.1437 mils by 1.8%. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the countywide taxing authority Volusia County Law Enforcement Fund is 1.5994 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 1.3452 mils by 18.9%. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the countywide taxing authority Volusia County Library Fund is the rollback rate of 0.3891 mils. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the countywide taxing authority Volusia Forever Fund is 0.2000 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 0.1850 mils by 8.1%. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the countywide taxing authority Volusia Echo Fund is 0.2000 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 0.1850 mils by 8.1%. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the taxing authority Mosquito Control Fund is the rollback rate of 0.1647 mils. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the taxing authority Ponce Inlet and Port Authority Fund is 0.0692 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 0.0640 mils by 8.1%. The fiscal year 24-25 millage rate for the taxing authority Municipal Service District Fund is 1.6956 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 1.5646 mils by 8.4%. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the taxing authority Silver Sands Bethune Beach Municipal Service District Fund is the rollback rate of 0.0106 mils. The fiscal year 24-25 operating millage rate for the taxing authority Fire Rescue District Fund is 3.8412 mils, which is greater than the rollback rate of 3.5459 mils by 8.3%.
Did you have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion to accept the millage rates as just read by Councilman Santiago, and the second was by Matt Reinhardt. Any other discussion, questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And millage rates are set 6-0.
All right. So the fiscal year 24-25 operating budget is the amount of $1,322,153,507, and the non-operating budget of $257,428,775.
Motion to accept the budget?
Second. Johansson.
Have a motion to accept the budget by Councilman Santiago. The second was by Councilman Johansson. And for comment,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief comment. George, I know you got your team out here, your leadership team. Thank you for the work you do with the money we give you. You guys all do a great job, so just want to say thank you, since you were all here at the same time. Thank you, George.
before we vote on it, I want to put it a little bit in perspective. That I printed out something that you and Ryan had sent us. In 2015, the millage rate was 6.31. We just voted on 3.2, and we've cut it in half, basically. In 2020, it was 5.6, 5.59. So we're heading in the right direction. We couldn't do it. This is a catch-22 if there wasn't new houses being built and new taxes being levied and property values going up because so many people want to live here. So it's a catch-22, but those are significant numbers that in 2015 to have 6.31 and today 3.2. So with that said, we have a motion and a second on the floor to accept and approve the budget. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the budget is approved 6-0.
So the last thing I need you guys to do is just confirm the second public budget hearing that we will advertise in the News Journal. We are proposing the date of Tuesday, September 17th. It says 6 p.m. on the slide. It is a night meeting already. Just for full disclosure, you can do 5:01 p.m. or later. You just can't do any earlier than that. So if you wanted to set it at 5:01, you could, or you can keep it at the 6 o'clock.
Yeah, we're going to be here from 4 on, so we can just stop at 6 o'clock and do the budget. David can help me manage the agenda well.
Happy to, Mr. Chair.
Keep it going.
Happy to help.
Motion to have the hearing held Tuesday, September 17th, 2024 at 6 p.m. or later.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to keep it at 6 p.m. At the next council meeting. Any discussion on that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the meeting is set. And we are adjourned at 6:36.
Party time?
Oh, I thought you said hold on. I said you can't make a motion now.